Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and we almost forgot for nearly 2 months to do a tier list, but we've updated it for everything from the Sinister 6 update all the way back in, late March up until now. I know I called it the April tier list. I know it's officially May 1st, but we have to cover this, especially since the new update is landing tomorrow, right? In just over 36 hours or something like that, the new update is going to be live, and then that will push back the next tier list even further, and we'll just completely miss this gap in time. So rather than having an overloaded tier list in a couple of weeks, especially since we don't usually cover the new update with a tier list, we usually wait until the mid-month, which then puts us like 2 weeks into May. I decided it's much better to do this right now. So I know we're going a little further back in time than usual, but bear with me here. We're going all the way back to the Sinister 6 update of Green Goblin, Red Goblin, Dr. Octopus, and Kraven. That was the last main update that we had. Believe it or not. I know it feels like forever ago, but yes, it was what we last got. And unfortunately, it wasn't that memorable of an update, and that's why it feels like it was so long ago. Kraven got his Transcendence along with Lizard and Rhino, who aren't even bolded here on this list because they're still so bad. You can see Rhino's over here, and I'm pretty sure Lizard is over here as well in the, oh, you can't even see, they're cut off, but yeah, they're in the please rework category. You can sort of see Rhino here in the edge. But Kraven got his uniform, and although it's got some cool quirks with you know, infinite invisibility, and it's got a support buff, they really just didn't do enough for Kraven. And what's shocking is, we didn't get Shocker, but also that Kraven is situated just coincidentally next to Mystique on the tier list. And if you actually look at Mystique's passive for the team and you look at Kraven's, Mystique's is better. And Mystique is a character from what, 2020? Right? She's 3 years old as a character. She's never gotten a uniform, and somehow she has a better support passive than Kraven. So I'm not really sure what they were thinking, on top of the fact that Mystique has a self-buffing leadership, so at least her leadership increases her damage. Kraven doesn't. So Kraven is like a worse version of Mystique, and you have to buy his uniform anyways. So yeah, they really dropped the ball with Kraven. It was a shame because he looks super cool, and yeah, they wasted the sort of like gold glow that they gave him, sort of like Chasm with the green glow. I think they wasted a lot of the art on Kraven because unfortunately they just didn't make him strong enough. They didn't buff him enough to be relevant. Green Goblin, on the other hand, massive upgrade. And what's crazy is that Green Goblin got a massive upgrade when he was already really good from No Way Home. Now you can still play him with No Way Home, they're not that much different, but the Red Goblin has some seriously cool animations, very smooth rotation, not as proc friendly, definitely leaning more into a Judgment or a Rage at that point, but very strong nonetheless, and easily dominates ABX and basically just blows all of the other speed villains out of the water. Chasm, Electro, Gamora, Requiem, you know, they all take a backseat to the Green Goblin now with his tier 3. It's just no contest. The other cool thing about Green Goblin is that depending on his uniform, whether it's No Way Home or the new one, you will see how his damage sort of changes and where the damage burst really is. Because with the Red Goblin uniform, he loses the proc on his 4th skill, which makes the tier 3 the really big burst. But for No Way Home Green Goblin, his tier 3 does almost no damage because of how strong his 4th skill is with that. I think it's a 100% damage proc. So keep that in mind when you're playing with him. But very strong supervillain, and very much like a Shuri, like a stronger version of Shuri, because he has a leadership, which Shuri doesn't have, and then he has the same valuable support that Shuri has, or a similar one. But then on top of that, he's got high damage dealing and high value for ABX, like Shuri does to a lesser extent for ABL. Not the de facto best, of course. That's either Shadow Shell or Black Widow, but she's certainly a third option and a much cheaper option if you don't want to go the tier 4 route. And then the last one is Dr. Octopus, who got the tier 4 from the Sinister 6 update. That was surprisingly a really good tier 4. I still don't have him tier 4 because I just hate the way that he looks and I don't like the way that he plays, but it's undeniable how strong he is for competitive content like ABX and especially ABL. Very strong there. Also has a lot of different tags to take you to make use of his function for World Boss Legend, and hits very hard in those game modes. So a little bit quirky to play, but undeniably extremely strong, and that says a lot considering that he's in a very packed combat tier 4 class. Like, look at that, we have 7 combat tier 4s now. That's just way too many, but somehow the cream rises to the top. So yeah, big shout out to Dr. Octopus for doing that. I think he's a bit of an underrated tier 4. I think a lot of people are still looking to tier 4, you know, Hulk. They're looking at tier 4 Moon Knight and Venom, and they're sort of just ignoring Dr. Octopus, but he is very, very good. Just doesn't have PvP value. That's really the only place that he really lacks shine. That about does it for that the full update. Then the mid-month, if we go a little bit further ahead, was Squirrel Girl and Thanos. Now, Thanos delayed the making of this tier list because he was going to get a rework, so I couldn't do it at the time. Squirrel Girl, on the other hand, although she's good, she just comes at a time where we have Green Goblin. And Squirrel Girl is a more expensive Green Goblin with fewer buffs, right? She doesn't have a leadership for damage. She doesn't buff anyone except Thanos, so she does have a support buff, but it's not really a support buff because it's only for one character. And even though she's very proc friendly, she doesn't have access to easy guard break immunity, so she gets interrupted sometimes. So yeah, she just seems like a worse version of Green Goblin. Very cool animations, very cute, very, like, you know, squirrel nut themed. But they really should have tweaked around her damage a little bit more to make her more competitive. I really feel like the balancing has been off lately with the way that characters are designed. There's no reason for Squirrel Girl to come out after Green Goblin, be forced to become a villain, and then also just be straight up worse than Green Goblin. It really begs the question, why would you ever build Squirrel Girl? Well, I guess if you just like the character, in which case it's a purely cosmetic thing. And unfortunately, the same thing goes for Kraven. So we sort of had a lot of it this month, or last month, I should say, where we had characters who were just not as strong as they should have been, and were only essentially cosmetic upgrades for players who cared that much. Thanos, on the other hand, not a cosmetic upgrade at all. Not at all. After his rework, of course, after his buff, where they tweaked a bunch of his stats and his skills, and then sort of the buffs that he gives himself, Thanos is firmly the, in my opinion, second best universal. But that doesn't say a lot, because there's still a massive gap, massive gap between Jean Grey and Thanos. And it basically comes down to PvP. Unfortunately, without giving Thanos a revive or immortality or some sort of insanely meta ability like that, you cannot compete consistently against characters who can revive, right? The only characters that can really compete with revive characters are other revive characters, or characters who you know, have immortality, or they have like an insane passive for dodge like Spider-Man does, right? If it's not that, then there's really no way to sustain in longer fights unless you're just bursting them down with 1 or 2 hits. And unfortunately, when you build your Jean Grey well, or when the enemies do, it's very hard to burst down a character that's that tanky. So Thanos didn't gain much in PvP, but what he did gain was a lot in PvE. In my opinion, now he's as good or better than Black Bolt for PvE, while combining that with insane tankiness, right? He's super proc friendly. He has iframe ignore on his main damage dealing skill, so your skills don't get interrupted when bosses iframe, which is really nice. You know, he's very easy to play. You can cancel his tier 3 early, so you have just so much flexibility. He has high move speed, high defenses, healing. You know, he's really got the whole bag of gifts. And basically the only thing he's missing is a VPAD skill. That's the only thing he doesn't have. But I would argue that having either iframe ignore on your main damage skill, or having VPAD on your main damage skill, is sort of the top tier for damage. And of course, Black Bolt and Thanos, they have one of each. So yeah, that's where I'd firmly put him right now. Some people would maybe argue that he doesn't deserve to be that high, but I do think he does, given how strong he is and given how well and how consistently he performs. But yeah, Squirrel Girl, Kraven, massive L's. And then finally, we come to Sharon Rogers. Sharon Rogers extended the update cycle a little bit with a second mid-month where she got her tier 4. And thus far, it's been kind of quiet. I'm not going to lie. I haven't tier 4'd her yet. I haven't heard a lot of tier 4 news about her. I haven't heard people singing her praises in a really big way, or sort of posting, you know, insane clear times with her. So I'm kind of left to wonder if she's just a different version of Blue Dragon, maybe a slightly easier to play version of Blue Dragon. She's definitely tankier. I'll say this. She's one of the tankiest tier 4s we have in the Blast category, and that is saying a lot. She's tankier than Blue Dragon. She's tankier than Magneto by a long shot. She's tankier than Storm by a long shot. And she's probably tankier than Iron Man. Sharon Rogers is really tanky now. She really takes after her father, Captain America. But that's not really enough for players. They want to see the big damage. And maybe she's just not, maybe she's just too similar, right? She's not really different enough from Iron Man and Blue Dragon to be really blowing people's socks off. And frankly, I think that's okay. I don't think that there should be a massive power creep like that. The fact that she's already tankier than all of the other Blast Tier 4s says a lot, especially if you have difficulty playing with those weaker or you know, less tanky Tier 4s, positioning-wise, dodging attacks, reading the boss's moves, or maybe you just don't want to read the boss's moves. You just want to face tank, right? In that case, Sharon Rogers has something for you while also still being very smooth to play. The accusations that she's not proc friendly were greatly exaggerated. She's still very proc friendly. You just have to get used to the cancel because she has to throw up that spear now. But still very, very strong. Very cool animations. I love seeing that massive lance come down through the sky. It's very like cosmic, but also kind of like gritty and kind of sci-fi-y. So yeah, I really like Sharon Rogers. I did rank her. I guess I'm ranking her a little low. She also doesn't have a lot of value outside of like World Boss Legend because, you know, there's no ABL stage for female Blast heroes. There's no ABX stage for that either. But maybe we'll bump her up in a few weeks when we see more content from her. But I do like to undersell the new Tier 4s just a little bit so that there's not a lot of FOMO. Last but not least, I do want to cover the characters that were affected by the updates. So there's always some gravity with these updates as far as new characters coming in and sort of pushing out older characters. I would say Loki has lost a few spots, so we, you know, justifiably knocked him down to the bottom of meta gods. I wouldn't even say he's a meta god anymore. Certainly for the very few high-level ABX players and ABL players who can squeeze out every last drop out of Loki and make him competitive with a brilliant CTP build with Thanos, they're probably going to disagree with me. But for everyone else, literally everyone else, you have Thanos who's going to outperform Loki in those contents, and then you have Thor or Magneto or Jean Grey or someone else that's going to be way faster than Loki for clearing in Dimension Rift content and things like that. So Loki, you know, he'll get his Tier 4, he'll get his day, he'll come back into the meta. I'm not worried about him there, but he certainly has lost a step or two to these newer, shinier Universals and Tier 4s, and so we had to reflect that in the tier list. Similarly, we bumped down Polaris a little bit just to lead support, not because she's any worse, but just because we have a lot of options now for mutants. And, you know, we have Professor X, Magneto, we have Storm. Of course, if you don't have Storm specifically, then Polaris becomes a lot better, but I think the majority of players are just using Polaris as a lead slash support, and you can sort of see that in the rates of people equipping her with something like an Insight versus something like a Rage. And then I bumped down Molecule Man. He was in meta-ish, but let's be realistic. This is really just a PvP thing. This was a long time coming. He's basically just used as a leadership now for AC and barely in timeline battle. Maybe the new game mode will change that. We don't know if leaderships apply there like they don't apply in Battle World. But yeah, Molecule Man doesn't really have much going for him outside of the leadership. Very quirky, still very unique, but it just doesn't do enough and doesn't pull enough weight to have him on the team because he's basically dead weight at this point. He doesn't do any damage. He can't take down any incumbent PvP gods, and he just gets slapped around, and he puts you at a disadvantage because he helps the opponent build up their Tier 4, which is a massive known, or their Tier 3, frankly, which is a massive L in today's landscape of PvP. So yeah, with that being said, this is the breakdown of the tier list. I know it doesn't look that much different. Hopefully the new game mode will shake things up a little bit, but that's essentially why the tier list hasn't undergone a bigger change lately since Tier 4, because the game has felt largely solved since about September, October of last year. So we're going on maybe, you know, 6-7 months now where the game feels very solved. Every new character that comes in is a square puzzle piece in a square map where we can just easily plug that in and know exactly where it goes. Hopefully the new game mode will sort of mix things up and give us some new options, some new combos, and really highlight some different characters so that we can readjust this tier list and make it a little bit more interesting and a little bit more spicy. So yeah, Let me know what your comments are down below in the comment section, of course, where else. Thank you so much for watching the video. Smash the like button. It helps out the channel tremendously. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care.